Okay, let's do this. So this video is going to be a very basic introductory to NDK and to building very simple Nostr apps on the web using NDK. My name's Jeff. If you don't know who I am, I'm Jeff G on Nostr. You can find stuff that I work on like nostr.how, which is a basic kind of overview of what Nostr is for newbies, and a tool called Lister, which is an experiment in managing and using lists on Nostr. So today we're going to do a very quick kind of build out of a very simple web app just to show you the basics of like getting NDK set up and how easy it is to start fetching data from relays and using that data in a web scenario. So to do that, we're going to use Svelte, which is a really simple reactive web framework. Svelte is really, really nice if you're coming from the React world. I very much recommend Svelte over React for new kind of devs in the area. And for our purposes here, the nice thing is it's just very lightweight and very straightforward. So we don't have to do a lot of setup to get moving. And then obviously we're going to use NDK. And for people that don't know, NDK is the Nostr development kit, which is being built by Pablo, F7Z. And NDK, the kind of goal behind the project is both to give developers a really easy way to get up and running and build apps very quickly and very easily, but also to maintain decentralization and sort of make sure that the protocol is living up to what we all hope it will become. I think at the moment, there's a lot of clients out there that are very naively built. They connect to a single relay, or, they just do things in a way that was quick and expedient for, experiment purposes. But if we want these clients to become, robust, and we want the ecosystem to become robust, we need to be thinking about, how we build clients such that it maintains decentralization, such that it is using the protocol in the most interesting and broad way possible. So NDK is still very, very early. If you are watching this video and it's like 5 months since it was released, it's probably best to just stop right now and go find a different video. But this will at least give people now a kind of quick overview of how this stuff works, and hopefully get a lot more people interested and like understanding that development on Nostr is actually really, really easy. There's no backend. You don't have to worry about a database. You can just fetch data directly from relays and then deal with it only in the browser. So it is kind of a fresh, fun way to build apps. So let's go ahead and get started. First thing we're going to do is we're going to grab this and we're going to create a new app. So we'll just call this Nostr Start. We'll do a skeleton project. We're going to go with TypeScript, and we will add ESLint and prettier. I probably shouldn't, but we'll do that anyways. Okay, so now we're in our app directory. We have a brand new Svelte app that's been created. We'll take a look at that code in just a second. But let's go ahead and get NDK installed as well. So we'll just come over here and grab this and add that to the project. And for those that aren't familiar with kind of JavaScript development, you're going to need to go and do a bunch of kind of looking into how NPM works and how, dependency management and things like that works. But I think for most people that have done any sort of web development in the last, couple of years, this is going to look pretty familiar. So NPM right now is going out and fetching the latest NDK. I think we're good there now. We'll just run it one more time to be sure. I don't think we need to, but why not? And then I will open up code editor here. So let's go ahead and double check a few things. So first, to satisfy my OCD, I'm going to fix a few things in prettier. Tab width 4. Okay, and that's that. Okay, now for those of you who are not familiar with Svelte, let's do a very, very quick micro primer. So Svelte relies on convention over configuration in a lot of cases. And that makes it really nice and fast, but you need to know kind of where to put things in order to have it function correctly. The main place where that matters a lot is the routes. And so you can see that the brand new app already has a source file or source folder with a routes folder in it. If we open up that routes folder, we've got this page.svelte. This page.svelte, if I start up the server here and we go over to the browser, is because it's in the root of this routes folder, it's going to be the root of the actual app. And so you can see we're rendering what's on this, what's in this file right here on the page. If we were to come over here to routes and we were to add a folder called about, and then we added a file to that called page, and then we added about to that page, we can come over to the browser immediately and go to that about page, and it's going to show up. And that's because Svelte is just looking at the folder structure to understand where to point the browser. So we don't need to worry about that now, but it's just a nice thing to know about. So let's go ahead and get started with NDK. Very first thing we're going to do is get rid of all this stuff. We'll pop open a script tag. This is another kind of interesting part about Svelte, is that you are effectively writing kind of HTML pages. You put a scripts tag in it, you put the content that you want. So in this case, let's go ahead and just put a title in here, and we'll just call it Nostr start. And you can actually put style tags in here as well, which I don't normally do because I end up using Tailwind on almost everything, but we're going to skip Tailwind for now. So we might end up putting some style tags in here. And then you can basically just put whatever you need logic-wise in this script tag. So for our case, we need to go ahead and import NDK. So I'll pop back over here and grab the right code. Okay, excellent. So what we need to do here, as you can tell, we're importing the package. And I'll get rid of these comments because we don't really need them. And then once we're creating an NDK instance, and this is actually maybe an important point. Since we're going to be doing all of this in one file, I'm just going to put the NDK instance here. It's good practice, though, to actually instantiate NDK as a singleton instance. And so usually in a Svelte app, you would use something called stores, which is like a way to pass variables, like to define a common variable that you're going to use across your app, and then be able to access that variable in a bunch of different pages. We're not going to worry about that for this initial demo, but I can get into that later if somebody else, if people really want to know about it. But just, I guess that's an important piece, is usually you want to make sure your NDK instance is a singleton, and you're reusing it everywhere in your app rather than defining it on each page separately. And the reason for that, as you can imagine, is that if you created a new instance and you connected it every time, you'd be connecting to the same relays potentially multiple times. And so there's certainly reasons you might want to do that, but especially if you're connecting to different relays for different purposes. But if you're just connecting to a default set of relays, 5 or 6 relays, and you want to be able to use that set of connections over and over again, do it as a singleton. Okay, cool. Rant over. Let's go ahead and we'll connect up. Let's see. I don't know. Nostr band. We'll do Damus. And then I'm actually going to do purple pages as well. Purple pages. If you're not familiar with Purple Pages, I'll jump back over here and show you real quick. Purple Pages is another Pablo creation, and it's a cool relay because it only handles kind 0 metadata events. And the important piece there is that it goes out and tries to kind of scrape or trawl all the other relays out there for their metadata events. And because it's only handling one, specific type, it's got really good coverage, and it usually responds very, very quickly. So it's a great relay to include for making sure that you get the best kind of user profile data coverage you possibly can. Okay, so we'll go back to our page. You can see we've got our H1 tag here. Nothing happening. We've got the console open here, so we can do some stuff and look at that. But we now have NDK instantiated. It's not doing anything yet, but it is instantiated. Now, the next thing we need to do is, there's 2 different things we can do. Before we can actually use these relays and actually fetch data from relays, we need to tell NDK to connect to them. But before we do that, there's actually a ton of stuff you can do without connecting to relays. And so, if we wanted to create a user, we can go ndk.getUser. And then this takes a set of options, and it'll either take a hex pub key in that format or an in-pub value. So let's go ahead and use an in-pub value, and I'm going to use text expander here. Text expander is a great tool if you want to not have to type so much. This is my in-pub, so you'll see that what we're doing is basically instantiating a user using NDK with this in-pub. Now, this doesn't fetch anything, like I said. So if we went ahead and did a console log of this user, what you're going to see in the browser is that we're actually not getting anything here. Like it'll pop up, but all it's got is this inpub value that we already gave it. Doesn't have any profile data, hasn't connected to any relays, doesn't really know anything about this user other than that simple inpub that we provided. So if we want to get data from these relays, again, we need to go ahead and connect. In Svelte, we have to be a little bit careful about that because we only want to do that from the actual browser. And Svelte will actually run this page both on the server side using Node and also in the browser. And so in order to sort of limit what happens with the connection there, we only want to connect while we're in the browser environment here. So that's why I'm adding this really simple browser check. It's just a kind of Svelte convention to make sure that we don't end up running this code on the server side. So what we need to do here is just tell NDK to simply connect. That's it. So what's going to happen is we're going to instantiate NDK. If we're in the browser, which we are, it's going to connect NDK to those relays. And this is a promise object that's going to return. You can pass in things like timeouts. There's a lot of different options across all these methods that we're not going to get into. But the nice thing in here is, like, if we wanted to, we could just say then, and then we can say connected. Actually, we'll console log. Whoop. If I can type. Okay. So now we're still not actually doing anything with the user data from that, getting data from the relays or anything, but we should be able to see that we are connecting to NDK. And if I reload the page, you can see we're connected. We've got the user that shows up in this console. We've also got connected, which means that NDK has created a pool of relays using the relays we passed it and has gone out and tried to make a connection to those relays. So now we are actually ready to start grabbing data and showing data. One really nice thing about Svelte is that it has a lot of these really nice kind of shorthand ways of doing things. And the await block is one of them. So you can do things like await for a certain promise, and then when that promise is returned, do something with the information. To get profile information for a user, we are going to use a method called fetch profile, as you can imagine. And the way that this works in NDK is maybe a little counterintuitive. Instead of basically fetching the profile data and returning that profile data directly, what it does is it fetches the profile data and it will return a promise with a set of NDK events. And those NDK events, as you can imagine, are going to be kind 0 metadata events. And so you end up with, if you wanted to sift through them yourself, you can. But what NDK is going to do for us is once all that stuff comes back, it's going to apply the correct values for all the fields in the user profile to the user. So it will automatically sift through the fields that it has based on the dates that those events were created. It'll find the most recent information, and it's going to just add that directly to the user so that once that full call is finished, the user object that we've already defined before not only will have an inpub, but will also have a full profile. And then we can use that profile. So in this case, we could do something like, user profile equals, well, we wouldn't do it that way. I think we would probably do that. And then we'd do this, and then we'd call then, and we'd do a big block, and we could do all that. Now, Svelte makes this easier, so we don't have to deal with that. What we can do is we can say await user fetch profile, and then we end up with and this is what this value is gonna return. We actually don't care about because that's gonna be the set of NDK events. So we can say, I don't know, we'll just call this events. Again, we don't really care about that. What we do care about is showing the user data. So we're going to wait for that promise to finish, and then we want to show some user data. So let's create an H2 here, and we will put in, let's see, user profile. Actually, sorry, user.profile.name. TypeScript's going to bother us about it potentially not being there. Let's go ahead and create a p tag here, and we'll put an image in. Source of that image is going to be user.profile.image. And actually, we better put some styles on this or it's going to be huge. So we'll just do width equal, nope, width 100 pixels. This is where I really wish I had Tailwind. HEI. Okay, that should be enough to get us going. It's complaining about the alt missing. We'll just give it something. And then I guess we'll go ahead and do one more tiny thing here, which is user.profile. Let's go with bio. Okay, cool. So now what should happen here, fingers crossed, live demo, is once this promise finishes, we're going to get back all this information about the user and we're going to be able to display that information. Again, what NDK is doing for us is it's going out and grabbing all the metadata, it's filtering, sorting, doing the right thing, and then applying that to the actual user object. So by the time we get in here, we should have all this information ready to go. And as you can see, it's refreshed in the background and already done it for us. So if I refresh the page again, now I don't know why my bio is coming up blank, but let's have a look and see if we can understand what's going on there. So we can see here that it's got a bunch of information. Interesting. Okay, bio is actually not the field that I was looking for. It's the about field that I was looking for. So let's go back over here and we can fix that. And now we get a really, really simple, pretty ugly user profile. And you can see how NDK made that incredibly easy. We didn't have to like filter through a bunch of events. We didn't have to like sort stuff based on date. We didn't have to try and like merge a bunch of information. NDK just handled that for us. So now that we've got a user, let's go ahead and grab an event. So let's look at, actually, let's go ahead and do lots of events. Events promise. And again, we're going to do NDK, and NDK has a really nice handy method here called fetch events. And fetch events takes an NDK filter. If you've used Nostr tools before, NDK filters are exactly like the filter object in Nostr tools. And so what we want to do is we can say, we give it a kinds array, and we're going to just look for kind 1. We're going to look at authors, and we'll just look at, hex pub key. So we are just going to provide that, the hex pub key version or the hex pub key ID of this user, which is me. And so this is basically just saying, hey, we want to fetch all kind 1 events for this user. That's it. We're not going to do any other filtering on that for now. We could limit it by time or things like that. The filter object gives you all the possible things you can imagine, but we don't need to do that yet. So what we're going to do is, again, this is a promise. This fetch events object is going to come back with a set of NDK events again, sort of like fetch profile did. In this case, NDK doesn't really do much other than give us the full set back, because that's generally what you want, right? And what we're going to do here is we'll use another await block. So we want to, so the promise is events promise. And then what's going to be returned is that set. So we'll just call that events. And because that's a set and we want to actually operate on it as an array, what we're going to need to do is turn that into an array. So we're going to go array from events. So this takes a set and turns it into an array. And then we'll call, as event. So now we're in an each loop where we've got a block with an event, and we're just going to start deciding what we want to show about that event. So let's go ahead and we'll do a div. Let's give it a class of event block. Like I said, we can very simply just do style. And this is just now a CSS block that's going to apply to just this page. It's sort of automatically scoped. So if we want to have a class of event block, we can do that. And we can say, let's see, padding, 10 pixels, border, 1 pixel, black, if I can spell. Let's see, border radius, 10 pixels. That's probably good. Okay, cool. So that's just a simple container object for us. And within this container object, we're going to have, let's call it an h3 tag. No, let's actually not. Let's just make it a p tag, and we'll just grab the content for now just to make it simple. So this event is an NDK event object. An NDK event object is exactly what you would expect. Like everything in Nostr is an event. This is just a representation of that event. And with NDK, it does give you a bunch of helper methods around NDK event that we won't get into now. But it's things like encoding, encrypting, decrypting, like that sort of things NDK can handle for you pretty easily. Since we're just worried about showing some data, that's all we're going to do here. The one last thing I'm going to add here is margin bottom, and we'll just give it, I don't know, 4 pixels of margin bottom, just to make sure we've got some space between these things. Now, what should happen here? What should happen here is right below our little mini profile, we should just get a giant list of events showing up. And it's not there. So let's go ahead and refresh the page and see. Okay, that was it. It just needed to get a hard refresh. And you can see here, though, we've gotten a full, mini profile. And now we've got all of my recent events from Nostr pulled back, and we're showing all the content of those events. Okay, now that we've got events showing, let's go ahead and skip over and do some NIP07 sign-in, just so you can understand how the interaction between NDK and a browser extension like Alby would work. This is how you would actually probably be pulling users in a lot of cases, is you want to get the actual user trying to use your app. And so a NIP07 signer is the standard way to do that. So to get going, let's go ahead and just delete all this events stuff. We'll get it out of there. We will comment this out for now, just so it won't confuse things and won't start throwing errors everywhere. We're going to get rid of all of this user code right now and the events code, just because we don't want to confuse what's going on and have 2 different versions of users popping up. So now we're kind of back to a very basic system where we're not showing any data, we're not fetching any users. We do have an NDK. We are instantiating NDK. We are connecting NDK. And so if we save this and go back over to the browser, we should see now we've got this connected. And if I reload, that error will go away. And you'll see that we're just connecting NDK, doing nothing else. So let's go ahead and get the signer working. So we've got this. We've got NDK. We need to have a button to sign in. So let's go ahead and we'll put that button up here at the top. And Svelte makes things like this very nice. We can just give it a method called login. Login with Nostr. Now we have a button on the page that says login with Nostr. That button obviously doesn't do anything, and we're getting an error because we actually don't have the function that it's looking for, login. So let's go up here and we can actually build that. Async function login. And this is going to be the function that handles our login for us. So the very first thing we need to do is make sure that we've got, that we're importing a NIP07 signer. So if we go here and we say import NDK NIP07 signer, you can see it goes ahead and completes that for me. And then what we want to do is within this login function, we first need to create an instance of this NIP07 signer. So let's call it signer. And we'll say new NDK NIP07 signer. That's all we need to do there. We don't need to pass it anything. We just need to tell it that it needs to exist. And then what we need to do is we need to make sure our NDK instance actually knows about this. So we can say NDK signer equals signer. And this will tell NDK, hey, when you need to go and sign something, when you need to connect to the actual user and get their permission on something, this is the thing you should use. In the future, NDK is going to do a great job of giving you lots of different signers that you can use. You've currently got options of NIP07, which is the browser extension, or NIP46, which is a remote signing device. Won't get into the details there, but the idea is that this is very plug and play. Depending on your use case, depending on what you're trying to do, you can swap in and out different signers. Caching is the same. You'll be able to swap in different caching layers. So you might want to use Redis as a backend for caching for your app, or you might want to do it like in browser with an IndexedDB cache. Those are both things that will be very kind of plug and play about NDK. So we've now got a signer. We've now got NDK, looking for that signer. And now what we need to do is we want to ask this effectively to sign something. So if we ask it for the user, what this is going to do is this method is going to call, it's going to call to the browser extension from the browser and say, hey, is there a user here? And wait until this user gives us permission or not. So let's go ahead and just see what happens if we run this. You can see nothing is going on. We click this and Alby pops up. And that is exactly what we expected to happen, right? We're not handling this yet, but all this wants to do is read our public key. So if we go ahead and confirm that, nothing happens. As you can tell, we didn't do anything. We didn't handle that callback, but we actually have given permission on that time. So let's just make that a little bit more clear so that we can see actually what's going on there. Because this is a promise that returns a user, we'll go ahead and just call that object user. And if we do a console log of that user, once it gets signed, we'll get to see what comes back from that call. So we'll come back here, reload the page. Yep, pops up again. We can see that it reads the public key. And then if we hit confirm here, we're expecting an NDK user to pop up here with the npub. And that's my npub again. So you can tell here that we actually are interacting with the signer. The signer is, waiting for the permission from the user and then coming back with the actual NDK user. Okay, so I think this is probably a pretty good place to stop. We have gotten a really simple app up and running. We've fetched some user data, we fetched some events, and we looked at how to set up a NIP07 signer like Alby to be able to fetch actual user data or to get permission from the user to sign events or to read their public key. So this, again, super basic intro. I'd love to hear people's feedback. Was this helpful? What else would you like to see next? I'm more than happy to do more of these. But yeah, I think that's about it. Hope everybody has a great one.